The Commanders have a new left tackle. Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. We have Free Agent Tracker that tracks the Commanders' free agent signings and moves, as well as every other team in the NFL. So give it a look there on ESPN.com. Also, if you want to become a club member, go to the Ampire Media YouTube page, see the word join, click on there, go from there. I will get back to the private Zooms for you gold members, and I will do one for the regular members as well at some point. At some point, I'll do, well, I don't know about a live stream, so there's nothing for Tuesday. I'm just going to keep doing these every day, and then we'll go from there. Anyways, big day today on Monday for Washington, the first day of the legal tampering period. They swung big and traded for Houston left tackle Laremy Tunsil, solving a big need for this, solving a big desire for this franchise because that's something they wanted. They also signed defensive lineman Javon Kinlaw. I'm going to get to him in a minute because the money was curious, but I wonder what's going to happen with him. Anyways, and they also re-signed Tress Way. Finally, Michael Gallup, former Dallas receiver who retired before last year, is going to be visiting the facility on Tuesday. So there you go. And then there are a couple of signings by former Commanders, Jeremy Chin to the Raiders, De'Ami Brown to Jacksonville, and for a one-year deal. And there you go. Now you're caught up. So let's get to the Tunsil deal. And I'm sure you've seen the terms. I'm going to read them for you just in case you haven't seen the terms. Washington receives from Houston Tunsil and a fourth-round pick this year from Houston. The Commanders send to the Texans 2 picks in 2026, a second and a fourth rounder, and 2 in 2025, a third and seventh round. So they give up, they now have 5 picks in the draft. And I know people are saying, like, I thought they were going to build through the draft. Well, nine last year, 5 this year. That's 14 picks. That's a lot of draft picks. And somebody from the organization reminded me, and they said that Adam Peters said that last year's class was going to be the foundation for what they're doing. So they had 9 picks last year. That's still a foundation. And, there you go. And also those draft picks are assets. What they did in Tunsil is they got a guy who could be a quality starting left tackle for 5 or 6 years. Look at Trent Williams out in out in San Francisco. And I think you can kind of look at that and say, like, could that be what's going to happen here? Trent Williams is still playing well for the 49ers. So Tunsil is 30 years old. You can have him for several years. He's got 2 more years on his contract, and then you can extend him, have him there. So like when you look at it like that, you did get a guy who's going to impact the franchise for at least 4 years, they hope, right? That's the hope for them, right? Because if not, then it's not going to be, wouldn't be quite as good as a trade. Anyways, but a couple things to stand out about this move. One, it suggests how quiet Adam Peters is able to keep what's going on in that building. And there was nothing came out about their desire to, what we knew is there was a desire to find a left tackle. And I think I told you that, but that's why when Ronnie Stanley re-signed with Baltimore, there was some disappointment in that building is my understanding. So because the plan was, hey, get that left tackle, then you can move Brandon Coleman. And I'll get to that in a minute. But what it suggests is, and the same with Kinlaw, like there was nobody tying them to him. Now, he wasn't exactly a big time signing around the league, and people scratched their hair at the numbers that he got. But again, quiet. But with Tunsil, it was just kind of boom, it came out of nowhere. And so that's what he's able to do. And we'll see. And like I said, he has 2 more years left on his deal. It's going to be what? I think it's 21.5 is the cap number. I might be off by a little bit, but I think that's what it is. So that's affordable for a Pro Bowl starting left tackle in the league. That's pretty good money for sure. And the other. But again, with Peters, this is a guy who last year, now we knew going into that draft that they're going to draft Jaden Daniels. But when I say knew, it was more like you pretty much figured that way. Everything pointed that way. He didn't tell his staff. Peters didn't tell the staff until the day of the draft. There are a couple people who knew for sure, but not many. So again, this is how he operates. And I think you can see that reflected in this trade. But again, this is a big time move and you solidify your offensive line. 3 straight Pro Bowls, 5 overall, athletic. So I talked to one defensive coach, texted with one, asked him about it. He's faced him, said when he's healthy, and right, he's as good as as good as there is in the league. Somebody who knew him in Miami told me great trade, strong and athletic. So ideal size, 6'5", 313. Now I will say he does get a lot of penalties. He was second in the NFL, I think, last year with 13 penalties. Maybe that was among offensive line, but he had 9 false starts, couple holds. So just understand that he will get a lot of penalties. So why would Houston trade him? My understanding is it's more about contracts. I think they didn't want to have to go pay him, and I think they had some other ones coming up. So they went in a different direction. But I don't think it was necessarily quality of play as much as it was more about contracts for him, and then probably, and I do believe for others coming up over the next couple of years. So, anyways, this is an impact offensive line move, and I can tell you they're pretty happy there. I can tell you, number 5, Jaden Daniels, I hear is pretty happy about this. That's a good thing. So let's look at with this offensive line. I think a couple weeks ago at the combine, Dan Quinn had talked about Brandon Coleman, and he was asked about how he viewed him as a left, if he was going to stay at left tackle. He was very non-committal about the answer, and this is why. And so Coleman gave them the flexibility, right? We said that all along. He showed, just like Mikey Samuelstill, they both showed they could play a different position that maybe they weren't necessarily, well, especially in Samuelstill's case, was not drafted to play. Coleman was drafted with the idea he could play somewhere, right? Especially at left tackle, they want to try him. Makes sense. But he showed he could play. He's a good athlete. He has a lot of good qualities. Well, now you can move him somewhere else, whether it's right tackle, you can bump Andrew Wiley. Could you go to left guard where you have Allegretti? My guess would be more right tackle. I don't know for sure. We haven't heard from the team about that. And even if you did that, like I would still keep Wiley on the roster. I'd want him as competition, backup, swing guy, whatever you want to say. Like I think he's a good guy to have around for sure. 1 year left in the deal. I do think they like him as certainly in the building, in the locker room as well. So you could keep him. And listen, man, he only counts a little more than 10 million on the cap this year. There would be like a $6 to $7 million savings. If you cut him, you're going to sign a backup who's going to make that kind of money. I think I'd rather have Wiley because he's he can certainly, if you went that direction. Now, I don't know yet if they are, but if you went that direction, you could still have him on the roster, and then you don't have to go find somebody else and fill that role. But I do think, like I said, with Coleman now, when you look at this offensive line, to me, it looks a lot different than it did just a day ago when you start to look at there are times like, how would it look in 3 years from now? Well, now you can look and say, 3 years from now, who do you see on this offensive line? Well, I could see Cosme, Biadasz, Coleman, and Tunsil now. That's for like you finally have a group that you can build with. And maybe Allegretti continues to do that. I could see him being around because again, another good dude who can play, you could do what you ask. Like, if you wanted to be this, he'll go be that. If you wanted to be a backup swing guard, he could be that. So I think it gives you flexibility, but you see the core that they have. Like that's the core right there. And you can always go plug in somebody else. Look at what Philly did with Mekhi Becton. You have that core offensive line. You plug him in. Look how it goes. When they brought Eric Flowers here, like you can plug guys in, but a little bit different. But still, you get the point. Like you now have a core, and it's a good core. Biadasz was a really good signing for them last year. Cosme has been a very good guard. Has been a very good guard. Now, when he comes back, I'm going to guess you can look at it and do the math and say possibly mid-October in that frame, but he's still a good player for you. And you have Coleman, who showed he could play. Now you have, like, they like to run those guard tackle stunts. Or the pulling action, excuse me, not stunts, but the counters, and you have good athletes now to run those with Tunsil, Coleman, Cosme. So I think you're in good shape there, and so Allegretti can move. So I think you have guys who can block on the move in space. This gives you something you just didn't have, and now you can bolster two areas with this one move, in my opinion. Um, anyways, I think it was just a big swing. And it's funny because when you saw the Stanley thing go off, one of the things that looks like Peters can do is adjust to the situation. They were monitoring Stanley. he goes off the board, you will start working on this. And so um, I give him a lot of credit. I think this is a lot better than going out and getting a Cam Robinson or somebody like that for sure, because this is a high quality starter. And, again, just beware, there will be some penalties. But I do think it gives you a lot of flexibility now for what you can do with your offense, and just puts better guys in those spots. The run blocking has to improve. I think, you would like to think it will. It's not like Wiley was a bad run blocker, but I do think you can get Coleman in some situations. And, just again, Jaden Daniels, I think, is pretty happy. Allows you at 29. One of the things you had to come out of free agency with was a high quality, to me, whether it's fill a high quality need. And this is one of this, they viewed this as a need and a desire, right? So they filled that. Now at 29, it frees you up to go, where do you want to go? Now, right now, you can look at it and say defensive line, because there's going to be some interesting defensive linemen there. Could you move back and pick up more picks and then get maybe a defensive end to develop, and maybe a couple other pieces? Now, we're getting ahead of ourselves here with that, because somebody has to have the desire to move up, and that doesn't always happen. Other teams want to trade back as well. So it doesn't, you don't know now if you can do that. You're not going to know until that time in the draft, but it would be a way to recoup some of the picks and continue to add good young pieces, because I think you need to do that to build more depth. Anyways, but it does give you that flexibility, and maybe you can turn those picks into more, and go from there. So now let's look at Javon Kinlaw, because this is the one that the signing note is surprising, I think, to people. I think it was the 3 years, 45 with 30 million guaranteed. That suggests that they really like him, right? So when you look at his play, does it match that love? Well, the one thing I'll say, and I would say this, like, you hear, I know heard from one executive, was like, basically just kind of change the defensive tackle market, right? With that signing. And just, you hear from other people who are like, they weren't quite sure what to make of that move. But there's a couple things I want to point out, and I think it's important. And before, it's, I can watch the film and see what he did. And I did do that. I spent an hour and a half or so watching his film from the Jets as well as from San Francisco. I've got opinions on that. But what I don't know is, how does Washington view him? What I do know is Adam Peters was with him in San Francisco. Daryl Tapp was an assistant D-line coach with him for 3 years in San Francisco. They know him very, very well. And apparently, obviously, Dan Quinn likes him, because I don't think they make this move if Dan Quinn isn't on board with it. So why do they feel this way about him? Why did they feel the need that they need to give him this? I don't know what his market was. I haven't heard that there was some strong market. Sometimes you hear that. I haven't heard that yet. I don't know. This would suggest to me that there were some other teams that possibly wanted him as well. But what I don't know is, what is your plan for him? Because I don't think it's going to be, again, one thing I've learned with Dan Quinn is you pay attention to what he says, because what he says oftentimes drops little clues and the little breadcrumbs that you have to really kind of gobble up. So at the combine, he did talk about, like, hey, going after guys, like, just because Team X used him this way does not mean that's how we see him. And I'm going to guess that's what applies here with Kinlaw. To me, inside, it's not the best match. And he's 6'5", and he plays like he's 6'5" inside at times. And I don't think you want to do that necessarily. When he gets in trouble, it's when he gets upright, and you see that there's an inconsistency to his game inside, because he will get upright, and that's when you get moved. Now, I saw one game, in fact, it was against his old team, the 49ers, in the opener last year. Some plays was up and down. Other plays were really good, because you saw some quickness the first step. And I think that's what you can build off of, right? Now, how do they see him? I talked to one guy who coached defense and coached against him, felt like he could be more of an outside technique guy, like, a 6 technique. So outside, and play in the run outside as an end, and then rush inside as a pass rusher. So I could see that as well. And I don't know, again, I don't know their plan. They're not going to talk about him until he's signed. And even then, I don't know we're going to get the full plan, but I have a feeling we will. The other thing is, when you watch their stuff last year, they liked that 3 defensive tackle set with Newton, Payne, and Allen. Well, this gives you a guy who can you could put another tackle out there, but you can also put him as an put Kinlaw as an end, and much like what they would do with Jalen Holmes. So I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm just telling you, like Dan Quinn is a guy that so for example, when he was in Seattle, now someone at Chad, can't remember, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he's with NFL Draft Bible, and first name is Chad. I just don't remember the name. I'm drawing Chad Forbes. So on Twitter, he pointed out like, hey, is this like the elephant end that they used to use in Seattle under Dan Quinn? Because as he pointed out, they had a defensive tackle named Red Bryant. He was a backup, just a reserve defensive tackle. Well, under Quinn, they moved him out to defensive end, and he solidified the run defense. And so maybe that's what they have here. That's why I'm not going to sit here and go crazy over the signing one way or another, because I don't know the plan. If it is to keep using him the way he was, well, I think you're going to be disappointed, because I just saw inconsistencies. Even as a pass rusher, I think he's going to need some refinement in there, because there were a lot of times where it looked like there was a lot of activity just not going where he needs to go. But he does, I think you can take advantage of, like, there's some length there and there's a first step. Can you refine that? That to me would be the key, because we haven't seen it yet. And the other thing I know is Robert Saleh, he was in San Francisco with him as well. And then they brought him, then he signed him in with the Jets before last season. Obviously, it didn't work out well for him. But the point is, like, that's now another guy who liked him enough to bring him to where he was. But he used him the way he was used in San Francisco. So I'll be curious to see how they do that here. That's the key. And again, you can think it's a bad sign. You can think it's not worth it. And I'm telling you, that's fine. Go ahead. I'm all, you can have your opinion, but I'm going to refrain from it until I know more about how they see them and how they want to use them. And what I do know is this group is extremely set, or not set. They value the firsthand information, and they have firsthand information on him for sure. Now, you can say, well, so did Ron Rivera in Carolina. That's true. But these guys, this is their method last year, and it worked quite well. Like, it worked quite well all across the board for the most part. And so I'm not saying you have to buy into it. That's not my job to sell you on it. I'm just trying to bring out more perspectives and some insight into a situation. I just don't know what they plan for him, because to me, that's very much a key. And if he helps improve their run defense, which is a necessity, as we know, then you say, okay, it's good. But again, he's got to play better and more consistent than what he did. If you use that length a little bit better on the outside, inside, it just, to me, he just lost leverage too often inside there. And a lot of times it was just simply as, you're not seeing the explosion of the hips, and you're seeing him, he just gets upright and boom, you get in your hands in his chest, and now he's controlled. When he played with leverage, he could be pretty good. And there were a lot of plays I saw. He played with effort, played with energy. Like, I like that, and I think you can you build off of that as well in a different kind of role. And maybe, but if it's the same role, maybe they see something that others have not, that they can do with him. But this comes down to, do you trust them to make this signing and this call? It's okay if you don't, because you can have your reservations. It's a long way till September until we know the real answer as to whether or not it's going to be a good signing or not. And I do want to see more on the contract to see, when that, it's 30 million guaranteed, it's 30 guaranteed. So it's 10 per year at least. So, but I want to see the rest of it, how it's broken down. Is this really a 2-year deal? And then what's the, anyways. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But I want to know, again, I'm going to repeat myself again. So if you're whatever, but I do want to know what the plan is for him, because again, like, when I watched him, there wasn't enough evidence to say, like, hey, this guy's a budding, just ready to hit his stride. I don't know that I saw that. But if you think he can play outside and then over here in this kind of package, then let's see how that works. So that's the other thing. So anyways, those are my thoughts on that. And again, they re-signed Tress Way for 1 year, 2.8 million. Tress is going to be 35. So people are asking why not more than that, because he's going to be 35. And they've been giving out 1-year deals to the older guys. I don't blame him. And if I'm Tress, like I would take it year by year at this point, anyways. He's a big time family man, but he's also still a very good punter. And I don't see any reason why he couldn't punt for a couple more years if he wants to. But it's just like with Wagner and Ertz, they got 1 year deals as well. So that's Tress way. But it's amazing. And I'm glad for him. Been here for so long that, you get a chance to stick around here. It's, since 2014. And he's been a guy that's been through so much up and down with this franchise that I'm happy that he's back. And then, oh, by the way, John Allen is supposed to visit Minnesota. I do think another team would be interested, possibly Buffalo. I think that's one to watch there if he doesn't stick with the Vikings. And, again, like I would look at this, Allen is a better player than Javon Kinlaw. We know that. So, that's, anyways, we'll see how it plays out for sure. And then again, I think I told you that Gallup is going to be visiting on Tuesday. They know him very well. Again, another guy, another familiarity that they hope to tap into. And I talked to Daryl Tapp about this early last season about how much that helped. And the one thing he said is that it's a big help, and they had all the information. They just didn't know how all the pieces would fit when they all came together, but it worked pretty well. So if they made it right again, then it'll work. If not, then it'll be then you can have find a way at the signing. But with Tunsil, I think it's a good move. They've now traded for 3 veteran players, and you're hitting that window with Jaden Daniels' contract when you get Lattimore, Debo, and then now Tunsil in here. So, anyways, clearly they feel like they can build something. Now you still got to get some young parts in here through the draft to continue building just to add young depth, because that's always a good way to develop talent. Anyways, that's it for me on the first day of the legal tampering period. I'll be back most likely on Tuesday. I'm assuming there will be at least some more things to talk about. Can get into some other signings around the league, etc., and whatever else there's to talk about. But I'll be back. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.